I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, activists do what activists do, and now a sheriff's deputy is out of a job. Plus, WeHeart Seattle gets the love it deserves after a rough week, and asylum-seekers set up tents at a local park, although it didn't last long. We'll talk about where they are now. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Welcome to Undivided on this Thursday. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to give common sense a comeback. And speaking of commitment, I have a commitment to all of you. And that is, and I might not have articulated it, but I hope you realize that I'm always going to call balls and strikes. Sometimes that means calling balls and strikes against people who I respect, who I otherwise might be politically or ideologically aligned with. And I'm not worth anything in this job if I'm not willing to criticize even people who I occasionally agree with. And so it is a commitment to you that when I sit in this chair every day and I do my job and have this responsibility that I really, really value having, and value having this platform and having you watch and listen every day, that I am not going to pull punches on important issues. And I think we've had a couple examples on the show this week of, unfortunately, I hurt some people's feelings who I like and who I respect. And it's not personal, it's part of the job. And when we're talking about critical issues that shape our state and shape our communities, I take the job seriously. You know, we criticized KIRO Radio for their coverage of WeHeart Seattle, which I thought was incredibly unfair and unnecessary scrutiny for WeHeart. I hurt some feelings at KIRO Radio. Sorry to hear that. It doesn't change anything that I had to say about the reporting. And then there was something that happened as we wrapped up the show yesterday. So if you watched to the very end, in our closing sanity check, we were talking about the pushback that the Thurston County Sheriff's Office was getting for hiring former Tacoma PD officer Christopher Burbank. So a couple days ago, Sheriff Derek Sanders down in Thurston County put up a picture of him shaking hands with former Officer Burbank, who people will know because he was one of 3 Tacoma police officers who were acquitted in the 2020 death of Manny Ellis. And the point I was making at the end of the show yesterday was, I have no issue with it. This is someone who wasn't just a hung jury or something like this. He was actually found innocent at trial. And there's a big difference. There's no gray area here. And I have the clip here of the jury acquittal of Officer Burbank.
We, the jury, find the defendant Christopher Shane Burbank not guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree. We, the jury, find the defendant Christopher Shane Burbank not guilty of the crime of manslaughter in the first degree.
So he's found not guilty. In the eyes of the law, he's innocent. And not only the point I was making about the criticism and all these media hand-wringing stories about, oh, they hired this guy, and going out on the street and asking citizens, what do you think about them hiring this guy? Fine, do those stories, but it doesn't change the fact that he's innocent in the eyes of the law. And there were also, before that trial, several other reviews of what happened in the Manny Ellis case. And not only was Christopher Burbank found innocent, but the 2 officers who were charged alongside him were also found innocent. So at that point, are you really going to say that not only are officers in this state guilty until proven innocent, but even when proven innocent, they're still guilty and they can never work as police officers again? So I was in the middle of making that point to close the show when Nicole saw, basically in real time, that the sheriff's office had accepted the resignation of Christopher Burbank after like 2 days on the job. And in reading that, what you got at the end of the show was my genuine reaction of disappointment and disbelief that after just a couple days of angry community comments and activists creating a stir and going to the media, that this former officer who was just hired as a deputy felt compelled to have to resign. So I'm going to get into sort of, now that we've had a day to stew on this and learned a little bit more about what happened, I'm my opinion of the situation doesn't change, and I want to start there. But I want to get into what I do think is a difficult position, not only for Christopher Burbank, but also for someone who I do have a great deal of respect for, and that is Thurston County Sheriff Derek Sanders. So one of my issues here is how quickly this all went south. So when Sheriff Sanders announced that they had hired this officer who had just been cleared of murder in Tacoma, he was probably, I imagine, expecting a little bit of community pushback over it. And he seemed to stand his ground. There were some folks on Reddit. He posts a lot on Reddit, which is a good way to interact directly with the community. And he had been asked immediately after this hire was announced on Reddit. The question was, Sheriff Sanders, your friend killed my friend. Why hire this guy? And Sheriff Sanders, and this is just a couple days ago, went through a very detailed explanation of the thought process that he, as the sheriff, went through in deciding, should I hire this guy who was just cleared of murder? He said, Burbank spent 2 months with our background investigators who investigated every aspect of his personal and professional life. At the end of this investigation, they came to the same conclusion as the jury. Burbank was acquitted entirely, and despite Tacoma trying their hardest to find any policy violation, to substantiate, they found no violation of any policy either. As part of the hiring process, Burbank also participated in and passed a polygraph examination about the incident. He went on to say, looking across the totality of his 14-year career in law enforcement, Burbank has no other discipline outside of a few fender-bender collisions. People feel very strongly on both sides of this issue, and it certainly isn't hard to understand why. And then he goes on to talk a little bit more, but he clearly thought it through. And they had a 2-month-long investigative background process for them to be able to weigh the public perception of hiring this officer versus the need in their department in terms of staffing and versus everything else they looked at in this officer's background. So here you have a sheriff who made a decision, and he's justifying that decision to members of the public. And then the backlash ratchets it up. Ratchets up. And you have the same old activist class who goes on social media and tries to make the pushback seem bigger than it is. Again, it's a mob. It's a little mob, right? But they always have an outsized voice, and they count on that to try to get people to kowtow to them. So just a couple posts that were put out there. One of them from a woman named Desiree, who's sort of active in activist circles in Thurston County, and she says, someone tag all the people from Thurston County Democrats. So again, this is a political issue to them. They see an opportunity to pounce, and they're going to take it. And so in her post, she's talking about how Sheriff Sanders is a racist. He's hiring a racist officer, etc. And then there was this post from Olympia showing up for racial justice. It said, white cop with a K, Christopher Burbank, one of the police officers who murdered Black loved one Manny Ellis, was just hired by the Thurston County Sheriff's Office and received a signing bonus. Now, what's interesting is the person who runs that particular account is Talana Reed. And you'll know Talana Reed well. You'll remember her. She is a community activist who actually served on the school board for a short period of time and is, for lack of a better phrase, batshit crazy.
The police, both Black women were murdered by the police. And it amazes me how those pigs can sit over there to watch us peacefully talk about what we want changed in this state. It amazes me. And they don't pay attention until we tear it up. So just before I get started, tear everything up in this city until they do what we want them to do.
It is not a surprise in any way that someone like Talana Reed would have an issue with Christopher Burbank being hired on as a sheriff's deputy. Now, I'm not saying reasonable people can't have disagreements about whether this is a hire the Thurston County Sheriff's Office should have made in the first place, and we'll talk about that later on in the show. But someone like Talana Reed, who calls cops pigs and encourages rioting, who has said endless horrible things about the police, it is not a surprise, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to the sheriff's office or to anyone else, that someone like Talana Reed would have an issue and would try to create and stir up hate and anger over Christopher Burbank being hired. So anyway, all of this is happening behind the scenes. You've got the, decision that the sheriff's office made over a span of 2 months. They conclude it's a sound decision, they're willing, and they start defending that decision to the public when the hiring is announced. And then you've got the absolutely insane community activists like Talana Reed, who are spinning up controversy online as they're so good at doing. And of course, one of the things I think is important is not to bend to the mob. You make a decision, you stand by that decision, and you deal with criticism that comes in, and you stand your ground. Well, that's not what happened in Thurston County. So as we found out at the end of the show yesterday, and as my live reaction reflects, Christopher Burbank resigned, which I think is just a huge miscalculation all the way around. So I'm going to read a good chunk of the letter that Sheriff Sanders posted at the very tail end of our show yesterday. It says, "Today, I met with Deputy Burbank and discussed the impacts of his employment with our agency. At the end of this discussion, Deputy Burbank resigned his position with the Sheriff's Office and his resignation was accepted. The decision was based on community response and death threats made to Deputy Burbank's family. When I made the decision to hire Deputy Burbank, I failed to consider the greater community impact and instead made the decision based on business needs to remedy our staffing crisis. Furthermore, I entirely misjudged community perception on the investigation and jury process that Deputy Burbank completed. I recognize the harm this has caused to marginalized communities, and I was wrong." And he goes on to kind of talk about, again, more of the community pushback element of this and what he was trying to achieve. So there is clearly two aspects to this. And in making some phone calls and talking to some folks from the end of yesterday's show to today, I want to be very clear that Sheriff Sanders didn't fire Deputy Burbank. He didn't fire him. And it also seems like some of the threats that Deputy Burbank's family was receiving, some of the unhinged rantings from unhinged activists also impacted Deputy Burbank, and he maybe made a realization that, look, they're going to make my life on the job a living hell. So am I willing to put my family through this? Now, at the end of the day, whether Deputy Burbank felt pressured to resign, I can't say for sure unless I speak to him. I don't know if he felt pressured to resign and otherwise didn't want to. So I want to make it clear that Sheriff Sanders didn't fire him. However, I am disappointed in the overall tone of the letter announcing the deputy's resignation, because to me, it does seem to kowtow to the community. He goes on in one point to say, I understand that I might not be welcome in certain areas of the county anymore. Trust is gained in drops and lost in buckets. For those who have lost confidence in me or what we're trying to accomplish at the sheriff's office, I apologize for letting you down. I recognize that there are spaces I may no longer be welcome in, and this is a challenging reality for me to accept. I intend to schedule a time for a public forum or community, and I think that's fine. I think it's fine as a sheriff to acknowledge that there are some people who are going to disagree with the outcome or disagree with your decision making. I think one of the things that concerns me, though, is that you have a sheriff who I think is in it for the right reasons, someone who we have been a fan of, someone who has stood next to us in other fights. I mean, Sheriff Sanders, I don't just abandon my friends or people I respect who have been part of the fight towards sanity because they do one thing I disagree with. And I want to make that clear too. I think Sheriff Sanders has the backs of the men and women of the Thurston County Sheriff's Office. I think that he has done things and said things publicly that have fought for better public safety in the state of Washington. And so this isn't by any means some sort of wholesale dismissal of him as a sheriff and dismissal of other things that he's done. I'm questioning the tone of the letter in this case to make it look and make the mob feel like they got to win. And that's really what this is. The mob got to win. The mob got to win, whether it was a win because they had so many death threats and harassment and intimidation against Christopher Burbank that he decided on his own to resign, or whether it's a win because they got this long letter from the sheriff basically saying, I'm sorry, when he shouldn't be sorry. And I think that's the whole point. He has nothing to be sorry for. Now, we can have a reasonable disagreement about, hey, given this guy's sort of baggage, even though he was acquitted, and it just happened. Maybe that's not the lateral hire that the sheriff's office in Thurston County should take on at this particular time. I think reasonable people can disagree. But when you've made the decision, when you've made the commitment, when you've had 2 months to think it through and weigh what you know will be a segment of the community that has backlash for that, and then you turn around within a day and the mob wins, that erodes the entire movement toward common sense and sanity. It does, and it's not the first time that the sheriff has done something like this. You might recall that we were covering the Olympia School District extensively because they're just gone wild down there, and the sheriff had endorsed a common sense candidate. And then these same people, these same activists, the very same ones, were all angry on social media, the Thurston County Democrats, where they were getting them all riled up. And so Sheriff Sanders is like, okay, I'm just going to rescind that endorsement. And he might feel like this is some sort of the thing to do in the moment, or some sort of, he's going to be able to win some sort of larger battle by giving up these little ones. No, the little battles are the battles that matter. And so that's what disappoints me. And again, I've got to call balls and strikes. This is an absolute miss. I want to stress that Sheriff Sanders didn't fire this deputy. I still don't know for sure how much the deputy felt as if he had no choice but to resign, given sort of some of the pressures coming in. But I'm always going to call balls and strikes, but that doesn't mean I don't respect Derek Sanders and think that he has done a good job as sheriff. I just think that when you're faced for the first time as an elected official with what is a reality, that you're never going to be able to please everyone. He's never going to be able to please every podcast host either. But it's about conviction and making sure that you're standing by what you believe in. And for someone who I think does stand for common sense and sanity, any time you give in to the mob, it erodes what all of us are working toward. All right, speaking of me criticizing people who I otherwise like, Cairo got very upset with me. Is that fair to say? There was a lot of...
Oh, yeah.
So
Go ahead. Explain. I don't think they're mad at you. I think they're mad at
themselves.
The reaction.
So here's the thing. I used to work for Cairo Radio. That was my first job. So I have a special place in my heart for them. But that doesn't mean that they're above criticism either. I criticize the media all the time, and very rarely Cairo Radio. But they had this real miss where they did a 3-part series, and a big bulk of it was criticizing the work of WeHeart Seattle, which is a volunteer group operating off donations that are going out there and cleaning disgusting homeless encampments and trying to help people because the city fails at it and the county fails at it and the state fails at it. And my whole criticism wasn't about the reporting of Sam Campbell. Sure, I'm sure some of the stuff they had to say about WeHeart Seattle is true. They're kind of a ragtag mob of volunteers. They're not perfect, but the government is far from perfect. And the government has done a far worse job with far more money. And that was sort of my point, is why waste your time on this when the government really needs your time and attention and scrutiny? So anyway, I did that. I did a criticism as I would anyone. And there was all these passive aggressive tweets from Cairo staffers that were clearly directed at me. And I was messaging them personally hey, it's very clear that this is about me. You can criticize me publicly. I can take it. If I give it, I can take it, whatever it is. So they got their feelings hurt, fine. But I stand by the criticism of the story. And then Como News, that's why I tweeted out today, good morning to Como News and only Como News. After this disaster of a hit piece on WeHeart Seattle, Como News came out, and I'm assuming it was pre-planned, but the timing was wonderful. And they did a great story on how WeHeart Seattle, there was this North Seattle homeless encampment that was creating all sorts of problems for the community. And the community was hearing nothing from the city. This was supposed to be on a list of city encampments that were being prioritized for removal. Prioritized my ass because it was still there and causing all these problems. So Como News does a story on who comes in? WeHeart Seattle and Andrea Suarez.
These photos show the camp just days ago, which neighbors say was a haven for drugs and stolen items.
It was absolute mayhem. I mean, there was the main drug dealer car that was here, and they'd have 10 to 15 people swarming around that car.
Neighbors say they reported the problems on their street.
We've been calling for a month or so.
But nothing changed, so they turned to WeHeart Seattle.
All of the neighbors were starting to say, hey, man, there's kids here. This is a park.
Andrea Suarez is with WeHeart Seattle, a privately funded organization that does trash pickups and tries to fill in the gaps of government services.
We came out same day, and by, 6 o'clock yesterday, we had everybody moved along.
It was just a really gross, sad situation, but it's the same situation we've been dealing with, and the city is still not addressing it.
Yeah, the city's not addressing it. Como News said Seattle's Unified Care Team had this encampment on its priority list, but had yet to begin any outreach, which can sometimes take weeks or months to connect everyone who wants it to housing. And even when the city comes into these encampments, they do rounds and rounds of outreach. And I'm fine with that. Like, don't just go in and move someone along, because then they're just going to go, 100 yards away and set up their camp there. At least ask them. Tell them what services you have to offer, give them a chance to accept those services, and when they don't, boot them out. So the city, sure, it might get around to encampments, and certainly more under Mayor Bruce Harrell than before, where they're clearing these encampments. But they have this long, bureaucratic, red tape process, and in the meantime, these communities suffer. And there's crime that comes along with that, substance abuse, mental health issues, and just general quality of life issues. And I'm sorry. I have empathy for the homeless. But when you are working hard, you bought a house with your hard-earned money, you've got kids or something, and you want to be able to enjoy your neighborhood and the green spaces and all of this without being harassed by drug-addicted homeless people, I feel like that's okay to want that. So this is why, thank you, Como News, for doing a story that just tells what's happening, which is when the city fails, when the city falls short, when the city takes too long, people like and organizations like Andrea Suarez and WeHeart Seattle are there to pick up the pieces and get things done in a way that the government simply can't because of all the red tape that exists. And people might not like that and say, well, Andrea Suarez isn't doing things by the books. Andrea Suarez doesn't have a social worker's license. Andrea Suarez sometimes throws away pieces of trash that people say are their actual belongings. You know what? Don't care. I just don't care. Because this has been an utter failure. Some of the encampments that Andrea goes in and clears have been there for years and years and years and years. And if the city isn't going to do something, I'm okay if she goes in and does something and draws a little outside the lines. All right. Coming up next, we got a trio of just quick stories I want to get to, a couple of them updates. First, I have encouraged you guys, if you're thinking about selling your home this year, get an early start on getting it ready to hit the market. We don't know if the Fed is going to drop interest rates. I asked Wes Jones with sellwithwes.com what he thinks will happen market-wise if the Fed does not follow through on what it said in December, which is that it was going to have 3 rate cuts this year.
If they stay where they're at right now, I actually think that values will stay closer to where they're at. We'll see lower appreciation. We'll see appreciation, but it'll be modest. But if they start to come back down, well, that's when I think we'll start to see more of the multiple offer situations and the bid ups in home sale prices.
Yes, you want to be in a position to take advantage of some of those bid ups and multiple offer situations. So if you know your home needs some cosmetic updates, just get started early. Sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. It'll give you a market analysis, talk about their listing boost concierge service where they can come in and handle all those updates for you and even help you pay for them up front. So sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, a trio of stories I want to get to. I did want to update you guys. You will recall we talked about this horrible political redistricting in central Washington, where Democrats had sued over the redistricting commission's lines and said, oh, you're dividing unfairly Hispanic voters and it's a violation of the Voting Rights Act. And they had a judge that agreed with them. And these redrawn districts ended up redistricting the first state senator who's a Latina out of her seat. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. You did this in the name of equity for Hispanic voters, and then you took out the first state senator who's a Latina because she's not the right kind of Latina because she's a Republican. So anyway, Republicans had been very hopeful that the U.S. Supreme Court would agree to take this issue up. And they were sort of hoping this is not a done deal. Let's see if the U.S. Supreme Court is going to act on this. But this news came out yesterday. The U.S. Supreme Court has denied a stay in the redistricting case. So it does not appear that the U.S. Supreme Court is going to act on this case before, it's fully litigated through the process. And so that means that the new redrawn lines that take Senator Nikki Torres out of her seat are just going to move forward. This from Senator John Braun, the Senate Minority Leader. It's unfair that national Democratic special interest groups, led by someone from UCLA, partnered with Washington state legislative leaders to foist this discriminatory map upon Washington state Hispanics. They were aided in their efforts by an abysmal defense by Attorney General Bob Ferguson, whose partisan bias was properly called out in the briefs in this case. So yeah, I think it's interesting that you had like Bob Ferguson, oh no, I'll defend the state. No, you won't. Bottom line, this map decreases the Hispanic voting population in the new Yakima Valley majority-minority district. In addition, it disenfranchises the first Eastern Washington Latina senator by redistricting her out of her district, preventing her Hispanic constituents from receiving her outstanding service after the end of her term in 2 years. He goes, all this partisan gerrymandering map does is help Democrats to a greater share of political power. They reduce the number of Hispanics in the new majority-minority district in order to cram more Democrats in. The new district goes from a Republican majority to a plus 14.4 Democrat majority. So Republicans really feel like this wasn't about helping Hispanics at all, that it was indeed about increasing the Democratic majority. The chair of the Washington State Democratic Party has already said her goal in 2026 is to reach a supermajority in the House and Senate so they can, quote, clean up the state constitution. Well, this redistricting helps them move toward that supermajority. And I'm telling you, when you've got a supermajority that not even a veto pen can rein in, that is when we are truly doomed as a state. And I would feel the exact same dang way if it were a Republican supermajority. You're talking about unilateral, one-party control over our lives with no backstop for bad ideas. And that is a terrifying, terrifying prospect, given what that particular political party has already done to the great state of Washington. All right, moving on. Our friend Jason Rantz sent out an email that he got via a public disclosure request that is my pet peeve. If you guys have watched the show long enough, you know what my single biggest government pet peeve is. It's when publicly paid spokespeople, who we pay, again, with taxpayer money, to answer media requests and keep the public informed. It's when they pick and choose what media outlets they're going to respond to and who they're going to be transparent with. It's when they, instead of acting as taxpayer-funded spokespeople to keep the public informed, they do everything they can to protect the politicians, to protect the government entities who they're working for. And it's totally backward thinking. I do believe there should be a law against it. I've advocated for that for some time. But Jason Rantz, he does a lot of stories on the Seattle Public School District and on schools in general. And I'm not sure what the gist of his public disclosure request was, but I seem to think it had something to do with like emails mentioning him or something. So he puts out this email. He says, Seattle Public Schools communication staff doesn't like my questions highlighting staff's blatant political agendas, like promoting BDS to students, pretending men can get pregnant, etc. I should note they're now ignoring all my questions. That's a mistake. And so he puts this email in here, and it's from a Seattle Public Schools spokesperson to some other individuals within the Seattle Public Schools system. And it says, question to you, Mary. Does the comms team have guidance on how SPFS staff should respond to a conservative talk show that may be trying to further a political agenda in the questions it is asking? Think about that for a second. This person's paid with your money to respond to media requests. That is the job taxpayers pay them to do. And here this person is in an internal email questioning whether they even have to respond to a, quote, conservative talk show that may be trying to further a political agenda. It doesn't matter what political agenda Jason has. It doesn't matter that he's a conservative talk show. He's a bona fide member of the media. Commentary and people who do editorials, they're still members of the media. We are still members of the media. This is the job we do for a living, to inform the public. It is not and cannot be the course of action for publicly paid spokespeople to be able to simply ignore requests, blatantly so. Jason says they're not responding to him anymore. That's their job, whether they like it or not. If they don't like their job, they should get a new job. We see this. We have seen some of the worst examples of this in the King County Executive's office. One of the worst offenders resigned, so I guess that's a good thing. But it's almost like they feel as if they work for the entity. Like that this person thinks they work for the head of Seattle Public Schools. Or like a comms person for a politician believes they work for, and their mission is, their responsibility is to protect that person from scrutiny. That's not your job. That's not what taxpayers. Imagine paying someone to keep secrets from you. Imagine paying someone to keep information from you. That's what we're doing. I really believe, and I wish I could get a lawmaker to run this bill for me. There's two things I think would help with this situation, because this is pretty widespread throughout the government ecosystem. One, there should be a law and some sort of oversight commission that determines that people can be fired if they are caught doing something like this, as government paid spokespeople actively hiding information from the public. Number two, I think there should be there's a couple ways to go about this, but I think the Washington Coalition for Open Government should have to put forth a nomination list of people who the government can hire to put in these publicly paid spokespeople positions. And agencies can choose someone from that list. And I also think that they should be rotated every 2 years. So if you are a spokesperson for the governor, every 2 years, you have to rotate and be a spokesperson for a different agency that you have no sort of loyalty to. Because when you build up these spokespeople who are in these taxpayer-funded positions for 10 years at a time, they have loyalty to the person that they're working for, and they shouldn't. They should have loyalties to the public and to make sure the public gets the information it needs. So I think it should be a rotating job. Like, all the way through the system, one day you might be a spokesperson for the governor, 2 years later you might be a spokesperson over at the Washington State Department of Transportation. I know that's difficult, I know that sounds crazy, but I honestly think it would dramatically improve the accountability and transparency that the government has for the people it serves. This should be a fireable offense. That person should be fired today. They won't be, but they should be. All right, one other quick thing. You're going to see some posters popping up around town as the fight grows against the initiatives that we so cherish. Vote yes, pay less. Vote yes, pay less. But the anti-initiative folks, they're going to spend an awful lot of money, and they can't defend the policies. They can't. They can't defend the policies on the merits. If they could defend the policies on the merits, they wouldn't spend so much time lying about what their policies do. So they can't defend their policies on their merits, so what are they going to try to do? Well, they're going to spend tens of thousands of dollars putting up posters to make Brian Haywood seem like some evil rich guy. So there's posters popping up, like life-size. They're huge. They're popping up all over Seattle and Bellevue, and they've got a picture of Brian Haywood in this gold-gilded frame. It says, Brian Haywood, hedge fund tycoon, spending nearly $7 million to cut his own taxes at the cost of Washington kids. That's just greedy. Learn more at wallofshamewa.com. And there's some other rich people on the Wall of Shame. And these types of posters aren't new. They've had this Wall of Shame thing for a while. I remember seeing one on Eastlake Avenue, but now there's this renewed push to get Brian Haywood's pictures on them and hope that people care enough when they see it to go and read all their lies about Brian Haywood and the initiatives. So I just think it's fascinating. You really don't hear them arguing against those initiatives on the merits. It's all about, well, let's just vilify him. Let's just make him seem like some scary rich guy. And then, Nicole, did you see what we got in the mail today?
No, I did not. But I do love how they're like, oh, he hates kids.
He hates kids.
Like, oh, at the cost of kids. Oh, it's for the children.
So I got this little box in the mail. Make sure my address isn't on there. Got this little box in the mail. Open it up. There's this little gold bar. There's a gold bar in it.
Okay.
It says gold.
Yeah.
Even has a little marker at the bottom. But I was like, that's suspicious. It's really light for gold. Super light. I was like, that's weird. And then I look and there's this piece of paper and it's a little, what do you call these? QR code?
Yep.
It says, let's go Washington. I was like, interesting. Did Brian send us gold for, supporting the initiatives? So then I scanned it and I went and it took me to this page. Do you got it, Nicole?
Yep.
It says, say no to fool's gold. Say yes to savings. And it takes you to the Let's Go Washington website. It says, don't be fooled by radical progressive fool's gold and false promises. It's time to see through their deception and vote yes for initiatives that will truly benefit Washingtonians in the long term. And then it talks about all these false promises that they're making about, all this free money for all these programs that you like. It's not free money, it's our money, and you're squandering it. So anyway, they say I think this probably arrived around April Fool's Day.
Yeah, actually, they asked me for their address, so now I know
Oh,
why.
is that why? I was like, oh, I thought they just sent it because they like me. And then it also has this sort of like pick with it. Is that so I can kind of, is there something in the middle of it?
I wonder if you can...
Is there something in the middle of it?
It's like one of those dig for dinosaur bones.
Oh my God.
thing.
Okay. After the show, I'm going to dig and see if there's anything in my fool's gold. Because why else would you give me a little stick?
That's so cute.
Why would you give me a little stick to go
What
to?
a fun little
I love
mail
that.
out.
Oh my God, I love that. That's way better than angry posters.
Yeah.
Fool's gold, cool. Anyway, so that's what's happening there. I'm going to go, and I give you permission to deface these posters. Yeah? Yeah, deface the posters. Take them down. Or just put up like a Let's Go Wah sticker on them.
Just say,
100%.
No, well, I think you should just write on there, vote yes.
Vote yes, pay less.
Pay less,
So you have my
right?
permission.
Vote
If
less,
you
pay
end up
less.
getting arrested for
Vote
defacing
yes,
these
pay
posters, I'll come bail you out.
Yeah.
But I mean, isn't it defacing property to put the posters up in the first place?
I think so.
You know, one night I was up on Capitol Hill, having a couple drinks with my friends. I always get scared to go up on Capitol Hill because I've been yelled at a lot, like a lot of curse words hurled my way. But anyway, I was at this bar, this gay bar in Capitol Hill. And in the bathroom, there were all these stickers that were like attacking Sarah Nelson and Ann Davison. So I should put up the video because I was like, whoop, whoop, boop, 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 boop. I was taken down.
Good.
Oh, and I took videos of myself doing it. I should have done it. I was taking down all these, like, just defending Sarah Nelson and Ann Davison's honor, taking down all these stickers. Like, one of them was like, I think it was like Sarah Nelson hates black people or something like that. It was something dumb. It was like, you guys are literally mental. Oh no, it was Sarah Nelson hates poor people. Sorry.
That's exhausting. It's exhausting to see that.
Who's
stuff.
paying for those stickers? You know what I mean? So I was in there just taking them down. So yeah, go ahead. You know what? I'll go find some of these signs on the east
Take
side.
one of those giant Sharpies, the giant ones.
Oh, I love it.
Yes, pay
100%.
less.
You see, Brandi's just encouraging you to. I don't think it's breaking the law. Is it breaking the law
to write on
to vandalize vandalism?
No.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think
So anyway, really off the rails today. We're going to get to our segment Unbelievable next. There's some asylum seekers who took over Garfield tennis courts in Seattle, but they did not stay very long thanks to an anonymous donor who's going to put them up at a hotel. First, I have encouraged you guys to take the First Mark Challenge, and a lot of you have, and I love hearing the stories. Some of you, the First Mark Challenge, what it entails, if you are not familiar by now, is you go to First Mark, you talk about your insurance needs, your current insurance, and what you are hoping for. Maybe you need to save a little money. Maybe you need some better insurance. Maybe you're overinsured. That's been the case for a few people. They go out, they shop the market, and they're carriers for you. They come back and they present you with what they think is best for you. And you can decide, do you want to be a member of the First Mark family or not? Mike and I have been members of the First Mark family for a year. I just had yesterday a nice yearly check-in with them to see where my insurance is at, whether I need to change anything. One of the great stories I've been sharing this week is from Eric in Woodinville, who says that he listens to the podcast regularly, so he's obviously very highly intelligent. And he said that he thought for a lot of years that he could just deal with his insurance on his own, and he'd heard the First Mark commercials, and he's like, screw it, why don't I do it? Well, he does it. They end up saving him 30% on his auto policy and 70% on his homeowner's policy. So he's like, man, I should have done that sooner. He says, now I tell anyone I know who's dealing with changes to their insurance to give First Mark a call. And the very best part about First Mark, you never pay them a dime. So why would you not do it? It truly is a no-brainer. FirstMarkInsurance.com, FirstMarkInsurance.com, they work for you. All right, some asylum seekers took over a tennis court in the city of Seattle, but only for a short period of time because an anonymous donor is going to foot the bill to get them back into hotels. Let's talk about it in our segment. Unbelievable. Just testing you, Nicole. Just testing you. Making sure you didn't have a happy trigger finger. Whoop. Is that the phrase, happy trigger finger? No. Do you save these? Do you save it when I can't remember what the phrase is I'm thinking about?
No, but I should.
Twitchy trigger finger? Somebody will tell us. Doesn't matter. All right. So our friend Jonathan Cho covered a little bit of this. We've got some video of it to show you. So there's a park up in the Garfield neighborhood of Seattle. And some of these asylum seekers who we've been talking about this for some time, Seattle, in the Seattle area, not immune from the influx of asylum seekers who have come up through the southern border. Nicole, you want to hit this video? So at Garfield Community Center, and kids play baseball there. I mean, this is an active community park. Well, sorry if you want to play tennis. No, because there's tents there full of asylum seekers. So anyway, and this is, again, I really think that a lot of this has been organized by activists who are like, oh, go set up tents in they never intended them to live there in tents. They're like, go set up tents in this area and block everybody's access to this park. And then the media will cover it. It'll be a big deal. And then we'll get free money, whatever it is. I really think that's what's happening here. So anyway, this is from the Capitol Hill, Seattle blog. Asylum seeker camp moves in on Garfield Community Center grounds. And in it, they had a quote, which I'll just give her a lot of credit. So Joy Hollingsworth is the new councilwoman for this district, which is District 3. Remember who the old councilwoman was? Shama Sawant. And I gotta say, it is such a breath of fresh air to have a council member for that district in Seattle who actually gives a damn about what's happening in her district. Can you imagine that? Shama Sawant, she never put out stuff like this. She was so worried about her socialist agenda. So Joy Hollingsworth, thank you. So Capitol Hill Seattle blog put out a statement because the new councilwoman was like, well, gosh, this isn't good. You know, we've got asylum seekers here. They're taking out this playground. She said, my heart goes out to the migrants and asylum seekers. I also want to thank the Seattle City employees who have been on site throughout the day to evaluate the situation and respond to the immediate needs of this group. However, this is good. Wow. Is this a Seattle pinch? Nicole, will you pinch me? She said, however, the health and safety of youth and families in District 3 is my top priority. What? We need our community center open, the park clear, and our schools safe? What is going on here? Is this The Onion? I don't know. That's crazy. She goes on to say, this issue is bigger than Seattle. We do not have the resources to respond to this level of need. Migrants and asylum seekers who have traveled from countries around the world to various cities in King County are in need of work permits, housing resources, and other services. Our county, state, and federal governments need to help address this crisis from our southern border to our city's doorstep. Now, the only thing that would have impressed me more if she said, we shouldn't be a sanctuary city, and these people should be sent back, and we need to actually fix the situation at our southern border. That would have really got my juices flowing.
Yeah.
You said it. Nicole, why did you do that? That would have... It's just so stupid. Why did you say
swear
juices?
and a snort today.
Why did you say juices? I swore. I didn't swear.
Yeah, you swore.
What did I swear?
You swore when you said batshit crazy.
Oh, I did. I fired. Juice is flowing. Really get my. I don't know why I can't think of things. Anyway, so they're there at this park. The councilwoman's in there like, we got to do something about this because we need this park for kids. Gotta love that. But the Seattle Times has the update. Anonymous donor offers $50,000 to get asylum seeker shelters. Which woke billionaire you think that was? Nick Hanauer?
Could be.
I got $20 that it was Nick Hanauer.
That's a pretty small amount for him.
Yeah, that's like no big deal.
No big deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It says more than 200 asylum seekers, including families with children, slept in tents outside Seattle's Garfield Community Center Tuesday night. But the next day, an anonymous donor came forward and offered $50,000 to get them back into a hotel. King County Councilmember Sarah Perry confirmed the investment from the anonymous donor Wednesday afternoon and said she worked with the Kent Quality Inn to make the deal, paying for 61 rooms at the cost of $70 a night. It said this money will cover the cost of 11 nights.
And then what?
And that's the thing, is like, either this was a super woke billionaire, probably Nick Hanauer, or it was one of the rich Capitol Hill, like, liberal Democrats who are like, hey, my kid uses that park and has a game this weekend, so can you leave? It was one of those two things, for sure. I also just have to note on the unbelievable portion of this, so Jonathan Cho was there. Jonathan's crazy. Is he crazy?
He's a little crazy.
He's a little crazy. And he just can't do his job in some of these places anymore because all the activists do is harass him. And that turns into the whole story because it's like the activists are there in his face. And he got it really bad when he showed up at this park and they were having a press conference with other members of the media there, but apparently he cannot be there.
It's a public park, last check.
There are children here.
There are children.
Don't touch me again.
Can you get a job?
Don't touch.
Can you get a job?
Don't touch me.
Come in here and show people.
Don't touch me, homie. Gonna have to call the police? Look at this little soy boy. What's he doing? Mama, you gotta move.
No.
Jonathan loves this. Slow key.
Touch me. Don't touch us.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa.
It's just unreal. Now, Jonathan eggs them on a little bit. Look at this little soy boy. So, but at the same time, it's like, he can't even do his job. It's literally, this was during a press conference. So he was sitting there trying to film on his phone during a press conference. And the person giving it like called him out. There's a guy here who spreads misinformation. Then everybody just swarmed him, which is just absurd. These people, what did that lady say? There are children here. Get a job. It's like, I'm pretty sure you are the one who needs to get a job because you're at that person who said that is at these protests all the time. Like, I want to prove to me that you have a job before you tell Jonathan Cho to get a job. Unbelievable. All right, dipping outside of Washington State, shall we? In California, Nicole.
Yes.
I never text you after hours, right?
Just occasionally.
So, what would, if it was against the law for me to text you after hours, would you tell on me if I texted you after hours? Would you call the cops?
Well, if I was getting the money, but if the government's getting your money, no.
Would you try to put me in jail, you know? Get me fined.
Civil fine. Civil fine.
Oh, okay, civil penalty.
Yeah.
So in California, there's a new bill that would make it illegal for your boss to try to contact you outside of work hours, which I can see so many practical problems with this. What if there's like literally an emergency at work and you can't come in the next day? They're like, hey, office is closed. You got the day off. Yeah. Oh, can't tell you. So
the building burned down.
Show up. Or, hey, there was a mass murderer in there, and he's waiting outside in the bushes. Don't come in. Stay in your car. It's like, no. So
you can't even text.
It's
no text.
No. So
it's crazy.
This is from the Washington Post. Tired of late messages from your boss? A new bill aims to make it illegal. A California lawmaker wants to make it illegal for your boss to regularly contact you after hours, unless it's an emergency. Okay, so the serial killer might qualify.
Yeah.
Or to address a work schedule issue. Okay, this answered my two big concerns, right? If the bill becomes, maybe I should read the article before I just spew things out of my mouth.
Hey, it's a dem state. You don't know what's going to happen.
That's true. If the bill becomes law, any employer that violates it could face a fine of at least $100 per offense. Quote, the villain here, if there had to be one, is not the bosses, but really the technology, said the Democratic lawmaker who's proposing it. Everybody has a smartphone, so they're available 24/7, and that has led a lot of people to feel they can never turn off. Our laws are not updated to reflect that reality. But the fine is not the way to fix it. Now, I agree. Work culture has gotten insane. And when you think back, I think that when we were truly out of the loop with email and, landlines, we were certainly too young to know what it was like to have a, 9-to-5 job, 40 hours a week, and not have that constant email presence and phone presence, and be able to truly unplug. So I don't know what that would have been like, but I imagine it was probably pretty nice. I imagine it was probably pretty nice to be able to say, okay, I'm done with work for the day. Maybe I had to stay late here or there or whatever, but I'm going to go home and I'm going to enjoy time with my family. I imagine that was a much more pleasant way to live.
Although our jobs would be a lot harder without the internet.
100%. Yeah, well, because oh my gosh, don't even get me started on that. But coming in and all the show prep that we'd have to do, like day of, go down and get the newspaper. I remember that, back in the back when I was one of my very first reporting jobs in Lincoln, Nebraska, while I was still in college. In order to find out what sort of crime stories happened the day before, we went to something called Cop Shop, where you actually went down to the police department. They had a whole stack of the cases of the police reports from the 24 hours prior. You'd go through them, and then you'd hand it to the spokesperson, and you'd say, I'm interested in getting some sound on this case. And then they'd come up there and answer questions on whatever cases the reporters handed them to. That's how we got our stories. So I do remember that. But anyway.
Well, little other note is I did get a taste of that because the first radio host that I work with actually did still use the newspaper and cut out the articles and bring them in. And then I would have to kind of organize a little bit.
Who was it?
And then I'm not going to say.
Who was it? It was David Bose, wasn't it?
No. First, 20 years ago.
Who was it?
First. You don't even know him. Okay. But I would print out all of his emails because it was moving into that new technology was rough for him. So I would print out all of his emails, and then he would write the responses to listeners, and then I would go and type the responses he wrote.
Yeah, no, that's rough.
But it's funny because then once his radio career was over, he works at the Apple store.
That is so random.
Super
Because usually
random.
when you don't know technology, you're never going to learn it.
Nope.
Even me, I rely on Daryl for so much of that stuff, how I don't get how things work, and he does a lot of our social videos. But the other day, I taught Daryl something on Instagram.
Oh my gosh.
He was trying to figure out how to put music on something, and it wasn't working for him. I taught him how to do it, and I was like, oh my God. Anyway, so this bill out of California, it's ridiculous. This isn't the way to do it. I think that there does need to be changes in work culture, but that really comes down to who you decide to work for.
Exactly.
Are you going to work at a company that values your free time and doesn't require you to constantly be checking your phone? That's your responsibility. And this almost suggests that it's like, you can't even, it's like just having the phone means that you have to do it. No, you don't. You don't have to do it. And if you have a boss that expects you to do it, then that should be part of your compensation, or you should ask them like, hey, I'm going to just unplug from X to Z. But if they expect you to do it, then that's just part of the job, and you've accepted that when you took the job. Like, taking this job, that, yeah, we're going to be working weird hours sometimes.
Not 9 to 5. No.
Not 9 to 5, and it's like here and there, and there's some flexibility. So part of that's on you. That's personal responsibility.
Right. I do think it's going to require changes in both, right? Because these kids are being brought up on their phones in all extra hours, right?
Yes.
When they're not in school, the parents are handing them technology constantly. And so it's going to require a societal shift somehow. And maybe someday we'll get there, but I don't see it coming anytime soon.
I am pretty good at it. You know this. When I am off on vacation or whatever it is, my phone is dead. I'm not taking pictures. I'm not doing anything. I'm just living in the moment.
Ancient phone that doesn't stay charged because it doesn't go black. It doesn't go to sleep.
It's like an iPhone 8 or 10 or something. What number iPhone are we on?
We're up to 15 now.
Whatever, it works. It's fine. It has no case.
Barely works. Both you and my mom, both of you have phones that don't go to sleep. So they just drain their batteries all day. And I'm like, they're forcing you into the new phone.
Look, if it's an emergency, someone can call my husband. That's how I feel about that. If it's a work emergency, they'll call
me.
Or you. All right, we got to get to, it's Thursday after all. So we're going to go all the way across the country, check in on what's happening in the Sunshine State, where usually it's something completely different than what's happening in Washington. But actually, it seems like today, Florida's taking a page out of Washington's pot playbook.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Miranda, is this the best day of your life?
It is. Okay, if you would have asked me before last year, yes, it would have been the best day of my life. But
So just a little context, maybe TMI from Miranda's personal life. Big weed smoker. Big weed smoker until she, had her asthma thing. And then it was like, well, maybe we don't smoke weed anymore, Miranda. Maybe you just chill out on that. But now it appears Florida could legalize recreational marijuana.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I'm still super stoked for the recreational community of flower users, but I had to put my health first, and as much as I used to be a huge advocate for marijuana being good for certain aspects of your health, I've had to put my lungs first. So I have not smoked in a long time.
Yeah. So explain this, because this really just clears the way. Florida State Supreme Court says ballot measure to make recreational pot legal is approved. So it's still ultimately up to voters. I mean, what's the appetite for it there?
I mean, back when I think it was 2016 when we voted to legalize medical marijuana, it was like a 70% for vote. And even then the Florida legislature put a ban on legalizing smokable marijuana. It was just like oils and gummies and stuff for medical use only. And then just within the first few weeks of DeSantis coming into office, he had basically pushed legislators to lift that ban to allow patients to use the smokable versions of marijuana. I think that it will probably pass. I just don't know if it's going to get hung up again on any sort of loopholes and things in the workings like the medical marijuana did for a little while, but I think it's a good step. I mean, if you can't beat them, join them. And Florida,
join them and tax them.
I felt like it was only a matter of time before we went ahead and legalized, because I mean, we were one of the most populous states, I think the third most populous state in the nation. And so many other big states have already legalized recreational marijuana. And I think there's a lot of money for the government to have there too, if they open up dispensaries and whatnot. But
Yeah. If you can't beat them, join them and tax them. And I mean, we had all the weed coming in anyway. And not to say we haven't had some serious issues with our legal recreational, as you said. I mean, getting it off the ground, trying to make sure that it's financially feasible for people. And then we continue to have an issue here with the inability to participate in the banking system because it's a controlled substance federally. And so you have a cash heavy business and they're robbed all the time. So that would be an issue in Florida as well. But I'm hoping it makes more sense just to, there's like been this bipartisan push in Congress to try to do this like Cannabis Banking Act, where it's like, let's just let them use the banking system so we're not having robberies on a routine basis. So that's interesting. Is that November?
That'll be in November, and they need a 60% vote to make it go through. And DeSantis is actually kind of against recreational use. He states that weed just isn't what it used to be, and it presents its own dangers in that aspect too. But, if it's legalized, I think that gives people an opportunity to kind of purchase safer marijuana if they choose to go and instead of purchasing it illegally. The chances of you buying fentanyl laced marijuana at a dispensary are practically zero. So I would think that
one would hope
we would hope that would actually be a reason to legalize as well.
Yeah, it definitely, I wouldn't know. I have never partaken in the devil's lettuce, of course, but I have heard from other humans that it's far more potent than the marijuana that our parents smoked in the 70s. Yeah. But again, I can't confirm or deny personally. This is Nicole's over there laughing, but seriously, I had no idea. This is interesting. It's a Florida. I haven't heard about this, and I'm sure that other law enforcement agencies do this, but it has to do with Florida starting to train its law enforcement officers specifically on how to deal with people who have dementia.
Yeah, exactly. I think this also is kind of coming out because Florida is a state where people come to retire. And as you grow older, of course, you're at more of a risk of getting Alzheimer's or some form of dementia as you get older. And they say I think the numbers were 6 in 10. If you have dementia, 6 out of 10 dementia patients wind up wandering, and it leaves you at a greater risk for encounter with law enforcement. Dementia patients are known for, shoplifting without knowing, wandering the streets, driving erratically. There's a lot of different reasons why they would encounter law enforcement. So putting out a very specific training module so they can learn how to deal with this, not only deal with it, but identify the signs of it, also know how to de-escalate the situation. I think it's actually a really great idea.
Yeah. We always see the silver alerts, and a lot of that has to do with obviously someone who's elderly and who's sort of wandered away. But this makes a lot of sense because officers encounter a lot of different types of people who are going to have different issues. When you talk about someone with PTSD and being able to identify those signs, when you talk about someone who's deaf, for instance, who can't even hear your commands, you need officers to be able to deal with a variety of situations. And so absolutely especially with an aging population, having officers trained in that makes sense. Okay, one more thing. A Florida man says a space object crashed into his house. Usually I would dismiss a Florida man saying that a space object crashed into his house because I would be like, he's probably on bath salts. But NASA is actually taking him seriously.
Yeah, NASA is. And it took him a little while to get NASA's attention. He had posted some photos of this space debris and the destruction to his house. There's a hole in his roof and through some furniture. He had posted it to X, formerly known as Twitter. And finally, he got some response. Finally, an astronomer had commented and said that the time and date that crashed into your house lines up with when some space junk that was released from the space station was supposed to re-enter our orbit. So NASA, they finally got, I think that the attention of some legitimate astronomers got NASA's attention, and they picked up the piece of space junk from this man's house, I think it was last week sometime, and they're going to identify it and see if they are responsible for it. But this guy's homeowner's insurance is apparently covering the damage.
You know what? That was my very first question was, on your homeowner's insurance, does it cover things from space? Damage from space? Because this thing came in with a vengeance. You can see it went straight through the floors, through the roof, through the floors. So he could have died if that hit him.
Well, he wasn't in town, but his son was, and his son was apparently, I think, in the same room that it came through. And there's Nest cameras that show the chaotic event of this coming through the roof of his house. But the homeowner made a valid point, just saying that this is a great starting point for the conversation about how we're going to do space. Basically that, just because you're up there doesn't mean that doesn't affect what's happening on Earth. And NASA had said that this particular space junk that they think this is from was supposed to burn up in the atmosphere and not cause any damage. But if this turns out to be a piece of that battery pack that they had released 2 years ago, then I guess they're going to have to rethink how they get rid of space junk.
100%. Man, all those oceans out there, and poor guy comes through his roof. So very interesting. All right, Miranda, great edition of Florida Report today. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's not even controversial anymore. People know in Florida their freedoms are going to be respected.
Meow. Before we move on, I just have to say, so I was like, what is this fool's gold? It's wrapped in plastic and it came with that little thing. And so Nicole's like, is it chocolate? So I licked it. I don't recommend. If you got one, it's not food. Don't lick it. I don't know why I did that. So that was disgusting. But I still think there's something inside it. I'm going to get to the bottom of it. All right. If you have Tesla stock, listen up. You might have saw this week, Tesla stock wasn't doing very well. So we asked our friend Zach Abraham with Bulwark Capital to come on and explain why. Zach Abraham, welcome back to Undivided.
Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
Yeah, we were just talking about how our Daryl is helping you with a new studio, and you got new mics, and now your mics are better than my mics, and now I'm offended. So now I need new mics.
Daryl is like he's like the audio and podcast studio like whisperer.
He is.
You know what I mean? Like he dialed our stuff in so well. That guy, man, that's a skilled man.
He's great. So we look forward to seeing your new studio when it's done. Let's talk about Tesla, shall we? So Tesla shares have taken a big drop, and it's being attributed to fewer deliveries year over year. Your take on, is that really what it is? Is just fewer deliveries, so stocks go?
That and the valuation of Tesla makes absolutely zero sense, and it never has. And part of the reason is that's because it's like the most popular retail home game stock. If you and anybody listening knows this, and I guarantee you there's probably some Tesla loyalists listening to this. But you just go ask somebody that's got a substantial holding in Tesla, and they'll tell you, "I'm never selling it. It's going," and you're just like, that's a ridiculous position to take, right? But that attitude has really inflated the valuation of the stock, and they're trading at 45 times earnings. The rest of the automobile industry is trading at like 5 to 8 times earnings. And a lot of those companies' sales are growing. Tesla's are not. It was bound to happen. And we've been saying that for years. Like, guys, get ready, because if you own Tesla stock, you will eventually be down 50 or 60% at some point because the valuation doesn't make any sense. Now, I think what's happening is you're seeing a lot of the, like just think about in our world who we know that's gone out and purchased EVs. Most of them are not people making an insignificant amount of money per year. Most of them live on the coasts, right? And if those people that were really fired up about EVs, they've already bought one, okay? The guy in Spokane that uses his rig to build houses and they're not buying one. And it's not going to happen. You live in areas that are too cold, you're not buying one. Why? Because the efficacy of the battery goes down by 40 or 50% in lower temperatures. And sometimes in really low temperatures, it won't even start. Then you add into that quality control issues that Tesla's got, which are many. A lot of people are basing the Tesla valuation on full self-driving. It's vaporware. It's not true. It is not it's not even close. It's level 2. Okay, to be full autonomous driving, you need to get to level 5. And the best people in the industry think that that's, still 15 to 20 years away. But in my opinion, the bloom has fallen off the rose with Tesla. And it was always going to happen because the price of the stock was so far out in front of what the reality was. And you knew a lot of this stuff was vaporware all the way along. But when you got a bunch of shareholders that are dyed in the wool and part of the cult, they'll keep pushing the stock up. But you just know eventually, adults know that just because I can throw a baseball really high in the air and I can throw it so high you'll lose sight of it, it doesn't mean it went to orbit. I would bet you every dollar I've got that baseball's going to land on the ground. And Tesla's just in the process of landing on the ground.
I'd like to see Zach throw a baseball so high I can't see it. I'm going to call your bluff on that one. Zach's a whiz at this stuff, and this is what he does for a living, obviously, with Bulwark Capital, but they specialize in risk management. And so if you're getting close to retirement, saving for retirement, working hard, you only get one retirement, make sure it's properly protected. I suggest having a free Know Your Risk portfolio review with Zach and his team at Bulwark Capital. Just a good way to see if you're overexposed to risk. Do not put your retirement at risk. You only get one. Schedule your free risk review now. KnowYourRiskRadio.com. That's KnowYourRiskRadio.com. Investment advisory services offered through Trek Financial LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investments involve risk and are not guaranteed. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All right, let's dive into our daily subscriber show poll. I asked you guys about this situation with former Tacoma police officer Christopher Burbank. So there's, I think, like I said earlier, reasonable people can have a conversation about whether this was the best hire for the Thurston County Sheriff's Office in the first place. So I asked you if you believe that they should have even hired Christopher Burbank in the first place. A lot of you are saying yes, and sort of for that same reason I said is, hey, he was acquitted in a court of law, so should he be tainted forever and not be able to get a job as a police officer? Let's see. Dale Draper says they really need to do a thorough investigation and find whoever made those threats against Christopher Burbank and his family and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. I agree. Also, Dale Draper, Dale told us he was going to buy out the rest of our Make Common Sense Great Again hats. He did. It's in the mail, right? So, Dale, you should be getting those soon. And I think Nicole threw in some extras for you, some extra freebies for you. All right, Sally said, no doubt the same activists that called for Officer Burbank's firing are the same ones that supported Rep. Tara Simmons' proposals for letting people in jail serve on jury. Illogical, progressive ideas are running this state and it keeps getting worse. Kathy said, aren't death threats considered hate speech? I don't think so. Not against a police officer is not a protected class of people. Can he call the new hotline and complain? These officers were found innocent by a jury of their peers, and that should be the end of it. I'm tired of activists and haters calling the shots. Put charges on them. We need law and order brought back to our state. Dave Reichert for governor. I don't know if you can put charges. Well, you could. If for the death threats, I suppose. You can't issue death threats against people. Let's see. There was one I wanted to read over on locals. Chris says, just because he was found innocent of a crime doesn't mean he's suitable to continue in law enforcement. Those are two different measures. Yeah. I mean, I understand that too. And part of it's like, do have to consider optics when you're in a law enforcement agency, but you do have to feel for a guy who had nothing on his record as an officer, ends up being, I think brought into a political prosecution, is acquitted, and then it's like gets a job and a day later he feels compelled to resign.
Well, and they were acquitted because they were following procedure at the time. So the procedure has changed. So he actually does his job well, is what they were saying.
And you can only judge officers based on what they're trained to do. If they're following their lawful training, and then people are mad about that, then you have to change the training, as has happened in this case for the city of Tacoma. But so it's just like, again, officers in our state are guilty until proven innocent, and then even when proven innocent, they're guilty. It's just ridiculous. All right, we'll get to a couple more questions. Bill Biz with a $20 super chat on the Sanders Christopher Burbank thing. Going forward, is Sheriff Derek Sanders going to allow marginalized communities veto power over other personnel decisions? Why not all decisions? Ridiculous. And again, Sheriff Sanders has, I think, tried to make it clear that he didn't fire him. But I would like to talk to Christopher Burbank about whether he felt compelled to resign because simply about the threats about his family, which I think would be cause for any person to consider whether it's worth moving forward in that job, or if he felt like it's just better for the department that I go away.
But also after he said he resigned, Sanders went on to apologize or grovel to the
mob. I think that's an issue.
So that feels wrong.
Yeah. Dennis says it's these same activists who support a felon in the Olympia School District. Deanna Sanders, I hope Officer Burbank can move to Florida for a great career in law enforcement. Or even Eastern Washington or somewhere where literally the police departments would be like, we don't care what you say.
Right.
We're just going to do it. Crispin Wilkie, thank you for going to bat on this issue. It's so disappointing that our world has become this twisted. Oh, by the way, another great hair day. Thank you. Nicole's like, don't compliment her hair. Don't do it because her head is getting so big. It was a little rough to start off the show today. Let me see here. Baron of Gray Matter with a $10 super chat. They are the sheriff's department. Death threats are against the law. Arrest these wackos. Stand by his decision. How about standing by a fellow innocent officer? And then they said Sanders is a coward. Now, I will criticize people who I respect. And I think in this case, there is certainly some criticism warranted for acquiescing to the mob for a second time. On redistricting, Nancy Slotnick says, and that redistricting impacted 13 other districts. Yeah, certainly the narrative of the Hispanic lawmaker being redistricted out in the name of helping Hispanic voters, I think, got the most attention, but there was some other impacts from it. Jason Rants on that story. Mo Sterling says, the note was just asking for guidance, wasn't it? Yeah, it was, but then they stopped responding to his request. So it seems as if the guidance, and just the fact that they're asking for that guidance is unreal. You really think in any realm it's appropriate not to respond to a media outlet because it's conservative? That's crazy that you're even asking.
They stopped responding to me when I worked with Dory, and they have not responded to one request I've made for you. So they
little
pick
bias.
and choose.
And what I would also say is, yes, we have opinions and we might disagree with them on some things, but most of the media has a clear left bias. Why is that okay? And they don't even acknowledge it. Like, at least we're saying, yeah, we have a bias and we're going to operate in good faith and ask questions that are pointed. And you have more of a problem with us having an acknowledged bias, giving our opinion, than the rest of the media having a clear bias and acting as if they're unbiased. That's more problematic, in my opinion. Boo Boo Bear with a $9.99 super chat. No message attached, just throwing a little cash our way.
It might have been when you snorted.
Okay, maybe
or
swore. The swearing is starting to creep back up. So I
know,
need
we gotta
to
watch that.
I need to watch that. Baron of Gray Matter with $5 super chat. We have too many bosses that call outside hours or days off. It is illegal in the EU to contact an employee when they're off. I think then don't work for that company. I think that you can find plenty of companies who are going to respect your boundaries and what you do and who you can talk to if you feel like they're putting too much strain on your free time. So I do think there's a lot of personal responsibility. Don't answer the phone. Don't answer the freaking phone. They'll get the message real quick. On Jonathan Cho being harassed at the park, Rick Johnson says, why do the hardcore lefty libs always respond like thugs with violence and threats? As my wife tells her preschool kids, use your words. I agree, but then it's like something childish about like, don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. How about you all just don't touch each other? Like, just don't touch each other. It's crazy.
Keep your hands to yourself.
All right, we've got an interview. We've got a...
really quick. Somebody recommended us starting a donation box for Let's Go WA and to get some vote yes, pay less billboards, things like that.
Less.
And I think we will have some ideas for donating to that campaign. I've heard of things coming up that are in the works to contribute to that campaign. So
and you can always go to letsgowa.com. Letsgowa.com if you want to contribute.
I think so. They want, you want to see what you helped contribute to, and that's a billboard or whatever. But
100%, I get that. Although it is a full-time job to convince people to pay to watch this show, and so if I spread my time convincing people to pay for other things too,
I wasn't saying it was necessarily going to be us. I meant Let's Go WA, like they're doing another Freedom Fest. They're going to do a bunch of things that you can contribute to things like that,
and we will advertise those and talk about those. 100%. Yes, I spend so much time begging for money for myself that I can't beg for money for everybody else.
For sure.
So, all right. I'm going to skip the sanity check because we have a interview tape for Sundays with subscribers. And so, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment. And plus, during my sanity check yesterday, wow, that went downhill fast. Breaking news. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving Common Sense a comeback. We appreciate every single one of you so much. And since I just talked about having to grovel for money, undividedpod.com, somebody sent me a message today saying I've been freeloading for too long, and today I signed up to become a paid subscriber. Hey, that's all right. If you've freeloaded for a while, that's cool. Come join us. Just $5 a month, undividedpod.com. undividedpod.com. Subscribers, we'll see you Sunday. We'll see the rest of you on the live show on Monday at noon.